Hey everyone, I hope you're well. Thanks for sending in questions for me to answer. That's why I'm here. I apologise for the sound. This is an echoey room. I hope you can bear with it. But I've been setting this up for 2 hours now. And this is as good as I can get it. And also to warn you, anyone who knows me knows that I can never make a long story short. So don't say you weren't warned. And before I get started, if you've ever thought you might like to see me with my fabulous band live and you haven't done so yet, I'm on the road, we are on the road in September, and now would be a really good time to check us out. All right, question one is from Paul Valander. How and what do I do filling in the spare time I get between my grueling touring with Go West and as a solo artist? It's not really grueling, Paul, not by Taylor Swift standards. So I've got plenty of time, and I'm much like anybody else. I watch sport on TV. I like movies. I like a glass of wine. Don't shoot me. Question number 2. Kristen Lays from Canada writes, thank you, Kristen. I hope you and David are both well. She was wondering if on the song Someday by Pepsi and Shirley, is it me with George Michael singing backing vocals, and how did that come about? Well, this is a long time ago, Kristen, so I'm not sure I've got everything in the right chronological order. But Gary Stevenson, who produced the first Go West album, had been invited to produce 2 tracks on Pepsi and Shirley. I worked on those 2 tracks with him, helped with the backing arrangements and sang some BBs on those. And then that might have led to when George Michael was producing the rest of their album. I think my memory tells me that he had a cold on the backing vocal day. So I got a call, can't remember from whom, it wasn't George. I duly showed up at Psalm West, where Go West had done so much of the recording of our first album. It's a big studio on the All Saints Road, as I remember. It is no more, sadly. Trevor Horn's bass studio, I believe. So I can't remember saying hello to George or even meeting him. I must have done, but sadly that file has disappeared from my memory. But I'm standing in a big studio room, unusually for vocals, and the control room window was up on the wall and I couldn't see anyone. So I obviously had prepared the part. They rolled the track. I sang my first pass. I didn't really think I'd nailed it. So I said on the microphone, do you mind if I have another try? I'm sure I can sing that better. And George Michael's disembodied voice in my cans appeared saying, I'll decide what's acceptable and what's not. So that's my lasting memory of what it was like to work with George Michael. Question 3. Candace Scully would be interested to know about the album writing process. Lyrics or music first? Lyrics are always, for me, the most challenging part of the writing process. I might start with a title. I might even come up with a loose framework for a chorus. But the way I work, given I have limited musical ability, I can put together a scratch sort of framework and a demo on my computer studio at home, DAW as it's known, Digital Audio Workshop. And then once I've hammered the idea into some kind of shape that I wouldn't be too embarrassed to play to any of the players I'm working with, I would then send that sketch to them and say, can you make this better? Can you give me some ideas for a keyboard part here? Can you give me some guitar parts and so on and so on? And while that process is going on, that's when I might start addressing the lyric for real. But I'm not a writer that can write 3 songs in a day. I wish I could. You'd have had much more product from me if that were the case. But as Nick Kershaw said to me, one of the bigger challenges when you've written a few tunes is not to repeat yourself. It is difficult not to find yourself falling into similar and familiar patterns. So for me, writing a lyric and getting it past my own filter to a stage where I think it's good enough, at least for my standards, that can take me some time, weeks sometimes. And it's reassuring to read on the socials and elsewhere that there are other artists who'll take their time. Only the other day I was reading about Gilbert O'Sullivan and the writing process for a song called Alone Again Naturally. I don't know if you know it, great song. And it took him some time to write that lyric. He knew he was going to sing Alone Again, but he didn't have that third word in the title for quite some time. I find that reassuring because sometimes it takes me forever to get from A to B with a lyric, and often I feel like it's never going to happen. Mick Sharp. All right, Mick, how you doing? How's the guitar collection looking? Now, Mick knows I've got an embarrassing and... what's the right word? I can't think of the right word. An embarrassing guitar collection for someone who doesn't really play terribly well. But I do love guitars, and he's asking whether there's anything I've got my eye on. There's a muso term called GAS, Gear Acquisition Syndrome, for those of you who are not familiar with it. And I suffer from that kind of gas, although I congratulate myself that I think I'm getting it under control now. I think the process of making the Sea Glass album taught me that I've got mountains of nice toys, if you like, in my little room, and very little of which ever got used. But I know that Mick himself, I think you're a PRS player, Mick. I think you've got a 2 or a 3 pickup PRS. Sorry about this, ladies, if you're not interested in gear. And a very expensive amplifier, and so on and so on. For me, I guess it's largely form over function, because I love Firebirds, and the guitar that's been calling my name so loudly recently is the Epiphone, Gibson Custom Shop Epiphone 63 Firebird 1. Comes in lovely colours. It's a beautiful thing. It's probably a bit of a one-trick pony and not much use for a gigging musician like yourself, Mick, but that is what's been calling my name. And as I say, I congratulate myself that I've not given in and spent the money. Alison Curry. Hello, lovely. How are you? Thanks for your question, which is, when writing songs for an album, do I write just enough? Or are there some songs that for whatever reason don't make it onto the album? I think I kind of answered this earlier. The songs that don't make it onto the album that I've spent time and energy in working on, the things that don't make the album tend not to get finished, frankly. If I get from A to B with a song, it generally goes on an album because I'm not that prolific a writer. So there aren't dozens of demos waiting to be discovered at some point later, I'm afraid. Helen Borman, for your upcoming 60th birthday, Helen, happy birthday. You got your first tattoo, PJC, on your forearm. Have I got any tattoos? Well, I've been meaning to get a tattoo for about 50 years, Helen, but I've never had the courage. And I'm still a little unsure how to feel about how flattering it is that anyone would get my initials, my sigil, which was designed by Sally Hurst, tattooed on their skin. I think that the gracious way to respond is that it is hugely flattering, and I'm glad that you thought it was an interesting enough thing to put on your skin. This reminds me of another gentleman who got my signature tattooed on his arm, and on the occasion that he very proudly showed it to me, I'm afraid I didn't react in the way that I now wish I had, which would have been to say, that's fantastic, thank you so much for doing that. But I think he was a bit taken aback by my shock, let's just say, that someone would have tattooed my signature on their skin. So, Will, if you're watching this, that didn't go the way I wish it had gone, and I do apologise for my reaction, in case you were saddened by it. Right, moving on. Bex, how are you? How's life down under? Love New Zealand. Best of luck for the tour, says Bex. Congratulations on the new album. Thank you very much. She's looking forward to listening to it while she recuperates from her unexpected surgery. Well, I hope that was not too uncomfortable and your recovery is quick and painless. I've chosen many fabulous songs, she says, for my anthology album, The Deep Dive, out September the 6th. If I had to choose one more, what would that song be? Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure that it was that kind of a process, really. But I've learned, or I am learning, should I say, to answer these questions on the spur of the moment. So the first thing that comes to my mind is my cover of Lewis Taylor's song from my Game for Fools EP. For no other reason than it's a fantastic song, which I didn't write, and that's the song that comes to mind at the moment. Alison Stone. Hey Alison, thanks for your question. What's my favourite venue worldwide where I've performed? We've as Go West, we've had the opportunity to play many fantastic places. I mean, we've also been touring in Australia recently, and we've done that several times. And just the fact that I'm able to make it financially viable to travel all the way around the world to play songs to an audience is something, I think. So I won't name a specific venue, but that's always fantastic. We made it to New Zealand this last trip, which we hadn't done before, despite having a platinum album in New Zealand. Thank you very much, folks. But I guess if I had to single one out, it would have been in 1985 when Go West played 3 nights, I think, at Hammersmith Odeon, only because, or at least partly because, that's the venue, the big so-called venue where I had seen so many artists that I admired. And for Richard and myself to be playing Hammersmith Odeon at all with the fantastic band that we had was living the dream, really. Dan. Hey, Dan. Frequent flyer, medal award winner, Dan Cowan. The track list for The Deep Dive is awesome. Thank you. I'm glad you think so. How long did it take to finalise, and have I re-recorded any of the tracks? No, there's no re-recordings. I have remixed Stilettos from my Damn the Brakes album because, as I say in the sleeve notes of The Deep Dive, that's one of my personal favourite songs that I've recorded. And I didn't really think we squeezed quite all the juice out of it the first time round. So Gary's done a fantastic remix of it, which I think sounds pretty cool. And there are 2 new songs on the album, one of which is Love Will Lift Us Up, which is my current so-called single, whatever that means in this day and age. But no, I haven't re-recorded any of the other songs. And at one point I was looking at, I couldn't see the reason why I would make an anthology album, which would include covers, songs I hadn't personally written. But I was disavowed of that idea on the basis that Ain't Gonna Cry Again, What a Fool Believes, for example, is a better choice. Obviously it's a cover of the Doobie Brothers. Goodness knows why I ever thought that was a good idea, but Pete Vitesse managed to beat an acceptable vocal performance out of me, I think. But I would have not necessarily included that, for example, on the album. And I think certain people might not have been happy about that. So the compromise that we came to, I think it's pretty much 50-50 original songs and covers. So that was the end result of the process, rightly or wrongly. Moving on. Craig C. from Los Angeles. Hey Craig, how you doing? Thanks very much for interacting on the socials, and thanks for your interest and for your question. Any chance of us coming back to America? Well, as I've said many times answering this question about America, of course, I would dearly love to come to America. I think Richard would like to come back to America. We'd love to come back. And considering that we have had 2 top 10 singles, our cover of What You Won't Do for Love was an AC #1, I think. I would have thought that we would be more in demand in America than we seem to be. But the bottom line is, unfortunately, it comes down to money. I would be quite happy to come to America and break even. But what we can't do is come to America if we're losing money. And we haven't had a viable financial offer. So I'm sorry that's a really mundane answer to the question, but that's the reality. So if you know any millionaires who'd love us to come and play a private show, we're dead up for it.